morning, friends, and welcome to Informed Dissent. This is the news of the week, this Saturday, November 15th. Lauren Leggieri is away due to illness, and I'm afraid I am not nearly as funny as she is. But I'll do my best because most of the time in Genderland, the jokes write themselves. First up, a big week for LGBT rights at the Supreme Court. The court declined to revisit Obergefell, confirming that same-sex marriage is here to stay, even with a conservative majority. And in Kentucky, former county clerk Kim Davis, the one who refused to issue marriage licenses to gay couples in 2015, has officially lost her final appeal. A federal court has ordered her to pay roughly $360,000 in damages and attorney's fees to the couples she discriminated against. And honestly, I really hope these couples are still happily married and they don't now have to fight over the money her stupid ass now owes them. They went to the courthouse looking for marriage licenses, not a future legal settlement. Imagine having to tell your lawyer, no, this wasn't actually in the prenup. This was just the county clerk being a bigot. We saw a major milestone this week in the opioid accountability fight. A federal bankruptcy judge has now finally approved a settlement of approximately $7 billion with Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. This resolution has taken years and represents long overdue accountability for their role in the opioid crisis. This news feels painfully connected to how institutions sometimes ignore or enable harm, and how profit, power, and ideology can override truth. This settlement will not undo the loss, but we hope it'll finally bring billions to victims and families shattered by one of the previous most scandalous chapters in American medicine. Globally, we are now seeing the International Olympic Committee signaling that they might be on the cusp of a major policy shift, a full ban on males competing in female categories. IOC President Kirsty Coventry has made protecting women's sports a priority. They have said, after having to do even more research studies, what we all already knew, males have advantages that hormone suppression cannot erase. A final announcement could come right before the 2026 Winter Olympics. This follows what many of us remember from Paris 2024, when two men were allowed to beat the shit out of numerous women, and then gold was hung around their necks for it. In the US, Maine saw how some grassroots pushback actually can begin to take hold. In St. George, Maine, a very progressive coastal town, officials voted to allow a 13-year-old trans-identified boy to join a girls' basketball team. They cited the Maine Human Rights Act and fear of litigation. But the real story is what led up to this vote. There was months of parental organizing, private meetings, written objections, and packed community sessions, a pattern we are beginning to see nationwide. Pushback that is real, steady, and becoming increasingly public. Now this week, our guest, psychologist Angelo Deboni, Vincent. Vincent is a registered counselor and independent practitioner of psychology based in Sweden. His clinical specialty is in identity formation, disassociation, and what he has called the return to the embodied self. What makes Vincent so unique is his background. He grew up in South Africa in an environment marked by instability and had a long personal struggle with an eating disorder, an experience that gave him a visceral understanding of what it means to detach from one's body. Before entering psychology, he spent more than 2 decades in high-pressure, deeply embodied fields, from running multiple restaurants to training in aviation. This lived experience of human behavior, crisis, and resilience now informs every aspect of his clinical work. Vincent facilitates detransition support work and helps individuals rebuild their lives after medical or social transition. We invited him on because he had plenty to say about tweets following the recent debates over the rates of trans identification. Are the rates rising? Are they falling? Are they staying the same? Cori Cohn and I, Jamie Reed, were grateful to interview Vincent for this week's show. Good morning, everyone. This might be the first time, if you're watching, you will see Cori without a hat, so bear with us. We also have no Lauren today. She is out ill. So we're going to welcome our guest. Vincent, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with your background because I find it unusual, um, and really central to some of your clinical lens. So, what I want to do is, can you first take us back to you did not grow up in the country that you currently live in and
Mm.
work in? What was your early years? What were your early years like, and where were they?
So I'm gonna just preface this with first of all, I'm 50. So when you ask me what are my early years, we're talking about a lot of years. Okay, so I'll try to keep it limited. Um, I grew up in South Africa. I think what at least I find interesting is I grew up experiencing a lot of the dynamics of apartheid in the sense that we were, as Italian people, we were shunned as well. And I actually remember that. I remember being shunned. And it was a big reason why my family at least grew up very poor. Not all Italians did. Some Italians did very well in South Africa. But I've got this memory of the injustice. Okay, and it does play a role. We're going to get there. The injustice of systems, you know. So it's a very strong memory for me. I was very happy when the country changed, and uh, I'll try to sort of condense this. Basically, I did really well in South Africa, but then I mean, a lot of people have heard of what's happening in South Africa now, but the overall conditions got so bad that we immigrated in 2022. Honestly, I think I left. I think I might have died in South Africa because I was developing such a what's the word? I wanted some kind of justice, and I think it was going to put me in conflict with someone because I'd already had a couple of incidents with the injustice that was happening around us. Very hard to just stand by and witness that kind of thing. So we emigrated in 2022. We ended up in Sweden. Well, we chose Sweden. My wife's got a really good job here, and I work online. So it was pretty relatively easy. I hear a lot of South Africans really struggling with immigration, but we ended up in Sweden. I'm very, very happy, I must say. It's a fantastic country.
2022 would have been the height, or where were we at in kind of COVID lockdowns at that time?
Yeah, yeah. So South Africa went into lockdown in March 2020, and
Okay.
2022, I think when we left, they just lifted all the lockdown conditions. So they had a 2 year of some kind of conditions. The economy was completely destroyed. Maybe this is a good point to mention. Like I didn't study psychology as a youngster. I studied psychology in midlife, and I qualified during COVID. Before that, I had a restaurant business. I had several restaurants in South Africa for 21 years. So
Oh,
I'm an entrepreneur by sort of nature, but I was always driven by the justice thing, always. Like a big reason I took the funding to buy my first restaurant at 29 was because I realized how much I could do for people. So I was very motivated by that. My policy was I would only hire people that walked in off the street with no resume and asked for a job. And I did that for 21 years, and I upskilled people to run multiple restaurants. We had 5 restaurants at one stage. Um, and it was very satisfying, but I just realized that I started reading Steven Pinker, and that was like, whoa, there's so much more going on, and I got a sense of that wave of nihilism that we now know. And of course, I didn't see COVID coming, but I got a sense of the nihilism that was coming through the institutions, the long march through the institutions, as they say.
yeah.
I got a good sense of that through reading Steven Pinker, and I was like, I felt this overwhelming calling to just study psychology, like now. And I was very lucky. I know you're going to ask me about it later, but my pilot's license had something to do with it. But I ended up getting into a psychology college because I had a pilot's license.
How does that
Yeah, okay.
line up?
Should I explain that?
Yeah.
Um, because of my childhood, I had a rough childhood, grew up very poor. I was abandoned at the age of 15. I was thrown out of school at the age of 17. So I never graduated. So I didn't have a high school graduation, which would be a minimum requirement to get into a psychology college to do a degree. Okay.
Okay.
But here I am at the age of 45 applying to study at this private college. And they did have like a system to try and get me in under like lifelong learning. But she said
Okay.
normally this is like a long process. It takes like 3 months. And I was applying like a week before the deadline. Okay. Um, so there's so many other little stories here that the serendipity, I don't even know where to start. The serendipity of things that lined up that I ended up getting into this college and doing really well and really loving it. It was just a fantastic experience. Um, but my the lady was telling me how we're going to have to try and work something out, and I had to get character references. So imagine you're 45 years old. You've got to go and ask people to do a character reference for you. Okay. So I got a policeman who was a friend of mine, a psychologist who was a friend of mine, and a banker who was a friend of mine to do character references for me. Okay. As it turned out, they weren't necessary because my wife, thank God, very smart lady, she realized that there's this, most countries have it. You have a qualification like a registry, and certain things give you a certain level. And she remembered for some reason that the pilot's license, which I'd done about 10 years earlier, was a higher qualification than your high school graduation anyway, obviously. Okay. So I was so relieved. I was like, there's so much wrong with South Africa. I was like, this probably doesn't apply in South Africa. But she was like, no, 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 I've seen it. Like, I know it's relevant. So I went and I looked it up, and there it was that I could download a certificate, and I sent the certificate to the college, and she phoned me the next day, and she said, "You're absolutely right. We've never ever had this before, but we'd love to have you." And I got accepted, and I tell you, it was one of the happiest days of my life. I'll be honest, because
So
it
you
was
have this
almost
very interesting trajectory into psychology, something
yes,
that probably a lot of American psychologists do not have. They probably went directly from high school to
most
undergrad
people,
and
yeah,
directly through.
most people.
One of the other things that you have publicly spoken about is your background struggling with anorexia and some
Mm,
experiences of disassociation. When did you first
mm.
realize or get the diagnosis that you were kind of separating from your body through that?
Well, I'd say, look, you need to understand, like, I was anorexic between the ages of 16 and 23. I mean, there was no counseling, there was no therapy, there was no nothing. So I really just sort of stumbled my way through it. I didn't really like recover from anorexia and then gain weight. I had I had a worse crisis, which made me gain weight. Okay. So I must just again, I must be transparent.
What was the worst crisis?
Yeah, this is the problem. You see, once you talk about one thing, you need to explain the
Yeah.
other thing. Um, uh, the worst crisis was my girlfriend of 7 years, who was also anorexic, cheated on me. And this just completely shattered my world. I mean, I had abandonment issues. I had all sorts of things going on. We were both basically alcoholics. My life just was just shattered. I moved out of my place. I left my career. I used to be in advertising. I walked out of advertising. It's just a total meltdown. If any detransitioners are listening to this, they're gonna understand. There's this existential crisis that happens when your entire worldview is shattered by something, and this is what happened to me. And it took me about 2 years to recover from that. Um, well, to recover, to get back on my feet. I didn't really recover till I was like 29, but from that like whole worldview shattering, because I realized I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything actually. I had all these opinions. I was a very opinionated, arrogant, obnoxious, anorexic vegan. Okay, and I was severely anorexic. So you imagine this waif of a boy with black rings around his eyes lecturing you about how you should eat. You know, I mean, I was a walking contradiction. And I know, Cori, a lot of the detransitioners are going, uh-huh, that sounds familiar. So that when I found out she cheated on me, everything just broke. I went deeper into alcoholism. I was a reckless alcoholic for about 2 years. I don't even know how I survived that, honestly, Jamie. I was driving drunk all the time. I don't know how I didn't get beaten up because I was incredibly annoying everywhere I went. Um, my 20s were a mess. Okay. Again, I think, like you say, my trajectory to being a therapist is very different because I went through a lot of stuff. And then I was like, you know what? I think I figured some stuff out. And I think I need to just go and check that what I figured out is accurate. And I did that. And the more I learned, the more I was like, I mean, I'll never forget reading about existentialist psychology for the first time when I was 45. I was like, this is amazing, you know? So a lot of the stuff that I practice now is actually the formalizing. It's been formalized in psychology, but it's stuff that I've lived, stuff that I've done for myself. Um,
Could I ask what is existential? What did you say? Existential psychology?
existentialist psychology. So your reference should be someone called Irvin Yalom. It's not existentialism, the philosophy, which is a little bit more, I'd say, chaotic. Existentialist philosophy has a little bit more nihilism built into it,
Okay.
whereas existentialist psychology is more about, if I can summarize it in one sentence, it's basically an intuitive understanding that your very existence is a source of anxiety. So when you understand that we wake up with an anxiety about life, about being alive, and what to do about that, um, that reconfigures all the approaches and the methodology that you would use in therapy. It reconfigures that to a different orientation. Okay. So that's the sort of simplest way to put it. There's some other stuff involved. I mean, the, the fear of death is built into it as well. There's a couple of other things, but it's more of an approach. So as soon as you understand that there's an approach to the same principles, you know, whether you're doing DBT or you're doing what I do is acceptance and commitment therapy. But I do a lot of like with the work that you know me for, is more about this sort of more coaching, self-actualization kind of stuff. Okay, but if I'm going to do therapy with someone regarding other issues, it's going to be more along the lines of acceptance and commitment therapy, which aligns well with existentialist psychology. So I
Okay,
don't want to get too technical on that.
to
That's
slow you down for a minute. Are you
yeah.
saying acceptance and existence?
That's not what I said, but I see what you're doing there. In acceptance and commitment therapy, there's
Commitment.
a
Okay, so acceptance and commitment.
so it's I would call acceptance and commitment therapy to be like the precursor of understanding existential psychology. Now, I mean, other people might not agree with me, but that's my feeling. Acceptance and commitment therapy has an element of radical acceptance where you accept everything. Does this sound familiar? Everything as it is. You accept yourself, you accept the world, and then you reconfigure to find your way in that path. And built into that as well, yeah, Corey?
Could I describe something that I went through when I hit my bottom, basically?
Yeah.
So I remember very distinctly the point where I realized that I could not complete transition, and I wept very, very much. And
Acceptance.
everything didn't click. Well, I didn't resolve everything immediately. It took years to unpack everything, right? It didn't just suddenly.
No.
I didn't have all the knowledge, but what I realized is, one, I'm immortal. I'm going to die one day. Two, there's still so many opportunities in my life, and there's still so much beauty in the world, and there's still so many things that I can enjoy. Even though there's been permanent damage to myself, and there's decisions that I can never
Mm.
take back, that does not close off every opportunity ahead of me. And I like everything became like reoriented around that
There you go.
insight. So it stopped being what do I have to do to be a woman and accepted as a woman, And it turned everything around to, what do I need to do to make the most out of the rest of my life?
Yes, that's existentialism. So when you
Oh,
understand that, you see, when you understand that correctly, then everything you approach, everything that the client brings, you approach it from a different position. So someone says to me, I was bullied for the last 3 years of my life at school. Okay, I had a client the other day. I was bullied for the last 3 years, terrible bullying. Okay, I'm able to stay totally calm because I'm like, yes, but you've got another 85 years to go. So yes, we'll talk about that, and there's trauma and there's things we need to resolve and we need to build your self-esteem and everything. But relative to the rest of your life, this is going to be nothing. I mean, I'm not going to disregard it, obviously, but it changes the perspective on everything.
but there's a point of abandonment that you have to experience
Yeah.
where I don't think that I could ever talk if you've gone through it, you know what I mean. And if you haven't, I don't know how you relate it.
Well, let me say this quickly. Part of my approach is by so there's sort of some components of this. Okay, I don't go in saying to someone straight away, I'm going to teach you how to appreciate your whole lifespan. Okay,
Right.
but that's kind of what I'm doing. But it's on a very fundamental level, almost regardless of who the client is. It's a matter of reordering your priorities, which is what happened to you. Your brain found a new priority, and that is an existentialist priority. What am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
I should maybe, Jamie, I should probably just add as well. Part of my training was 2 years in a suicide call center, and that also, again, I mean, it was very intuitive for me to be in that kind of space doing that kind of work because I'd already, when I was 13, I almost took my own life. And I mean, when I say almost, it was this close. And I honestly, I feel like I've been living ever since then because the choice was it's life or life. And once you make that choice, there's this the seeds of radical acceptance I think were sown when I was 13. Actually, the rest was just, okay, let me just figure this out. Let me see what's next, what's next, what's next, you know?
So you are in Sweden, you go through this program, you complete your training. Were
Mm,
you already plugged into this world of gender, or when
mm.
did that come into your worldview?
It's a bit of a funny story. I sometimes feel like my whole life is a bit of a funny story. But anyway, um, it started with me writing about ideology. Okay, I wrote about critical race theory back in 2020. And I published on a WordPress page an article on I'm not even sure how this happened. Someone asked me to write something. I can't remember. We're going back a long time now. But I wrote this thing, which is still on my page. It's called CRT, The Devil's Finest Trick. And this thing went crazy. It went viral. I lost track. It got over 110,000 reads, and then I lost track. I stopped tracking it. But it was basically a summary of how critical race theory has disintegrated the rainbow nation that we all sort of imagined when Mandela was president and the country changed and there's democracy and all these wonderful things, kumbaya. The seeds of its destruction, of South Africa's destruction, were sown back in the 60s by ideology that was adopted by the party that rules the country now. Okay, I don't want to go too much into that. It's a completely separate arena. But because of the ideology perspective, one of the aspects that I recognize, and I think I did write about it, but that's in a different document. So, okay, 2020, the end of 2020, a paper that I wrote about a longer, more academic paper was published by the Journal of, a journal that's run by PsychReg UK. It's a proper journal, it's peer reviewed and everything. And the editor that year was John Barry, he runs the Center for Male Psychology in the UK, and he's the editor for two of the only male psychology handbooks that exist. Okay. So because of that, he chose my paper to publish in this journal. That also went a bit viral. So there were two different things that I wrote that went a bit crazy, much to my surprise, I must tell you, because I was still busy with my practicals. I was very consumed with wrapping up my life in South Africa. I was trying to save my business still because I was studying and doing my business at the same time. So I had lots of other things going on, but of course we were in lockdown, so I kind of had a bit of time in between, you know. Um, but the more academic thing that got shared with the people who run critical therapy antidote, Jaco van Zyl, Val Thomas, and a bunch of other people. They run that now, but at the time they just formed in December 2020, and I think there were like 80 members, and one of them is a guy called Dennis who runs PsychReg. He must have shared it with them. They asked me to speak. So their very first meeting online, they asked me to speak. And I was like, okay. I didn't know who they were. I mean, I'd met Dennis, but I didn't know who these other people were. So I kind of went in there and I did a 20-minute presentation on critical race theory in South Africa and how it relates to gender, to all the other components that are designed to destabilize a capitalist society. Okay. Which is what South Africa has done. They have destroyed meritocracy in South Africa. It is dead. And part of that, which I'm now watching explode in South Africa, is gender ideology. Okay, it's very much part of the same structure, ideological structure. So from that, I think Stella O'Malley was there, and I think there's a bit of a network and I'm not really sure who spoke to who and whatever, but then I got invited to join a couple of meetings, and I ended up in a Discord with some of the male detransitioners. I ran 2 meetings where I just offered my time to get them together. And it gave me an idea that you know, someone should be doing more with the boys. And then I'll try and stop now. But at the Kalani conference, a bunch of the detransitioners, I was sitting having a Guinness with Laura Becker, my friend. And at about 1 a.m, I realized I was surrounded by detransitioners, and they started asking me to run a support group. Apparently specifically because I'm not a psychologist. I'm trained as a counselor, which there is a difference. And I proposed it to Joe Burgo and Stella O'Malley, and they agreed, and that's how that first group was started. So that's kind of how I got into the gender thing. But okay, sorry, I skipped over a whole very important part. Because of the ideology, I got invited by the lady, I can't remember her name now, the lady who runs a magazine called Third Factor, to meet Laura Becker. And her and I we just hit it off. Thank God it was lockdown, so we didn't have anywhere to go, because our first meeting was 6 hours long. And we're still friends today because we did that podcast together. We did about 8 episodes where she got to unpack her detransition. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what a detransitioner was when I met Laura. And she was like, well, let me tell you. And I was like, whoa, this is insane. So a lot of, I mean, our podcast is very rough and sort of long and drawn out. But if you listen to that, that goes back to 2021. It's me unpacking my anorexia and her, 30 years later, and her unpacking her detransition. So there was a lot of overlap, and that's what made me see that there's an intuitive understanding to this that I had already.
So your background, your story, this whole framework kind of shapes how you're reading what's happening culturally right now.
Definitely.
So I'm going to bring us up to 2025. And probably maybe a month ago, we started to see some posts on X that were having people discuss the rates of trans identification. So a number of people put out some graphs and some posts. And there were, kind of debates back and forth. Who are we measuring? Are we measuring the non-binary college student? What's going on? And you had a couple of tweets kind of jumping into this. And you suggested that the waves of gender identification we've seen in the past decade, are they shifting? Are they not shifting? I wanted to explore some of those tweets and some of your thoughts. So I'm just going to ask this first question first. Do you think that the rates of trans identification are falling?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
I
So
think they're increasing.
Okay, okay. It's complicated.
Okay.
The thing Eric Kaufman published was focused on, and I'm not a statistician, so I'm not going to go into all the arguments about the way he analyzed the data and all that stuff. I'm not interested in that, okay? There's an overarching problem, which is woke in general is a rampant problem. Okay, let me go back to the thing that I wrote in 2020 talking about South Africa. Okay, in that article, I said, and I'm not quoting myself, but I implied at least that the ability for the ideology, the Marxist ideology, to reinvent itself is infinite. Okay, so Eric Kaufman
wait. Slow down. Okay. Okay. First of all, I'm missing Lauren right now because every time Marxism comes up, she looks at me and she's like, "See,
we don't have to get into
this is all about Marxism." Okay. So you said something. Say it again. That the face of Marxism or the
Exactly.
way it presents can explain it.
So my point was in the article that I wrote in 2020, I said CRT, the devil's finest trick. In fact, it's in the title. The devil's finest trick is to make you believe that he doesn't exist. That's actually, I've just realized that's very serendipitous of exactly what Eric Kaufman and people like Jean Twenge are doing, as much as I respect her work. Eric Kaufman, I don't really know, so I'm not going to say too much about him. But Jean Twenge, unfortunately, also used affirming language in her book, Generations. I've read it. I tried to ask her about it back when her book came out. She didn't answer me. I think someone else is running her Twitter account, so I don't know. But the point is, the devil's finest trick is if you want to achieve your goals, you have to remain unseen until it's too late. So you spread under another name. Okay, and in South Africa, we've got something called the NDR, which is the National Democratic Revolution, which was designed back in I think the 60s by a bunch of Marxists and Soviet-era propagandists with the ANC. It was developed in exile by the tripartite arrangement of the ANC, which involves communists. All right, but what a lot of people don't realize is the ANC was funded by socialists in Europe and America. So it was an alliance of Soviet, actual Russia, communist, USSR advisors from the KGB, literally. I'm not making this up. You can Google this. Along with the socialists in Western countries like Sweden, I'm afraid. The stuff that I know about the children of the exiles that still live in Sweden, living a very nice life as we speak, because I've met some of them in Sweden. It's a very bizarre experience. Anyway, so the idea that the devil's finest trick is to rebrand, regroup and rebrand. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing the ideology. People think the ideology is like this, well, actually it is a lot like the virus. It's morphing. You know, we knew about the different strains of COVID. It's the same thing. So to imply that people not answering on a survey, first of all, you're talking about people that actually chose to do a survey. All right. We didn't corner these kids and say you must answer the survey before you leave the room. Right. So selection bias. I'm sorry. Already, I'm not reading it. I'm not even reading it. Okay. From these kids that answered this thing, a bunch of them didn't answer non-binary. And he thinks that means there's less trans people okay, he's kind of admitted that he made a bit of a jump in the conclusion from what I've seen. It looks like he admitted that. But then Jean Twenge got on the bandwagon as well and said something different as well. I'm not really interested. I'm actually not even interested in what they're saying because I recognize bullshit when I smell it. Okay. It is the devil's finest trick. It's morphing under our noses, and people like them, whether they're doing it willingly or not, they are complicit.
Okay. So
I know that's a very bold statement.
Okay. So when you're saying it's morphing, are you saying that the way that young people are naming or willing
Yes.
to willing to publicly say, like, is the trans identification still there and present, but are we seeing young people who've caught on that adults think are cracking down, or is that the morph? Is that the shift?
I'm dealing with families where the only reason they know that their child is transitioning is because they found packages in the dustbin. They're not walking around anymore going, I demand you use my pronouns.
Okay.
They're not doing
So
that.
okay. So that's what I wanted to get at a little bit more. Are you still seeing on the ground in practice something that makes you think it's not disappearing, it's morphing, it's changing, that the virus itself has found workarounds? And that is actually what, we see in contagions. They find workarounds. If something comes up, they shift and they can move to get
Why?
around the immune system or
Why?
get around, yeah.
We can use COVID as an analogy, although that might irritate half your listeners. But the environment is ripe for a virus. Okay. We all lost basic hygiene practices because we got so comfortable in our very hygienic world. So a virus comes along, we start spraying things and we start wearing masks and everything. What does it do? It morphs because it finds a way to survive. You have to understand it as something that wants to survive in its own right. Okay, I know that sounds a little bit conspiratorial, but if you don't understand that, you're going to miss the ball. Let me just explain something else. Okay.
Yeah.
When I first started studying psychology, one of my reasons for getting into this was because I saw that the incel culture was exploding. Okay, it was unknown. When I mentioned it at my college, nobody knew what I was talking about. This is in like 2018. I did a presentation on incel culture at my college. Everybody was blown away. They'd never heard of this at a psychology college. Okay, but incels were shooting up schools in America already, and still nobody knew what it was. All right. Conveniently, why? Because it's boys. Nobody wants to know what's affecting boys. This is the gamma bias thing, that there's a general bias, like a blindness to the trouble with boys.
Sorry, did you say gamma bias?
Yeah.
Gamete. Yeah, the gamete bias.
You should look it up. So if you Google it, gamma bias was kind of researched and identified by the guys that did the Palgrave Handbook of Male Psychology. This is John Barry and another guy called Martin Seeger. It's been validated. A prolific bias across Western culture against anything good that males do. And if there's some kind of suffering affecting males, it gets glossed over. I promise you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's a lot of the narrative that comes from some of these crazy people like Andrew Tate and that kind of thing. It kind of comes from that observing that same phenomena, that it's only the men that are like alpha males that break through that. And the problem is amongst the incel community, which by the way is massive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people. They coach each other on how to avoid the expectations of society and adulthood. Okay, so now suddenly we've got young men that have found another way to avoid adulthood. So we had 15, 20 years of incel culture that nobody was interested in. Why? Because it affects boys. If the same thing was affecting girls, the governments would have been involved. All right. It doesn't happen with boys. There's no Richard Reeves at the moment. He's got some funding from the American government, I believe. But I mean, it's now. I think he got it in like 2023. The problem with incels has been going on for 20 years. So the problem with boys in general was already mentioned like 30 years ago. This prevailing, and now we've got some data that shows the crisis with boys was going up from about the 70s. Right, so there's an underlying problem. And by the way, I'm talking about the boys right now. But if you think that what happens to young boys doesn't affect young girls, it's ridiculous. These are symbiotic relationships. If the girls see that there's less available men, they go into their own existential crisis. That's the milieu that they're growing up in. They're seeing a lot of boys excluding themselves, removing themselves from society. The only other boys that are available are these alpha types that have the ego strength to escape that paradigm, that ideology.
Okay. Bring us back to the rates, though.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there's this shift you're talking about in maybe the kids have caught on. They know not to answer the questions anymore. You mentioned something interesting where the kids initially were demanding and pushing and telling their parents they
Yeah,
wanted these hormones. And now you're just seeing that the parents are saying there's evidence of it in the trash, which is bins, trash. We'll
literally.
accept it as the American language here. Um, do you feel like that shift is happening globally? Do you see that in
Yes.
Europe? Is that like, where do you feel like that's occurring?
It's occurring in pockets. Because I do, by the way, I do, for people that don't know me, I deal with people around the world, in Europe, now New Zealand as well, Hawaii, America, the UK. So maybe I'm getting a more of a global picture than someone like Eric Kaufman's getting by looking at some stats on his screen. Um, uh, all right. So in America, we have a gender critical president that takes overwhelming power, right? Of course, there's this paranoia about how much power he has and all these other things. But in the light of that, if you accept the sensitive gender dysphoric child's perspective that this tyrant has taken over the country, do you think they're going to answer surveys that say I'm trans when they actually believe, they really believe that any minute now they're going to be rounding up trans people? These people believe this, okay? So like I say, Eric Kaufman and Gene Twining are sitting on an ivory tower somewhere looking at numbers on a screen. They don't understand. So these kids have realized, I cannot declare that I'm trans. The ones that have already, they're going to find a way out of it. Okay, and I see that as well, by the way. A lot of them are kind of half detransitioning, but actually the medical process continues. They keep taking hormones, they keep whatever. But I'm saying it shouldn't be a stretch to see that the rewards and incentives in the structure of the society, it's funny how we can recognize that doctors were affirming it, clinics were affirming it, insurance companies were providing funding for it. WPATH was going around the world talking as if they were a new religion. And we all understood that that was a reward and incentive system that was built into our culture. But when the shift happens, we suddenly claim victory. No, the shift has changed. The people haven't gone away. The problem hasn't gone away. The culture is still ripe for some kind of pathology. It's going to be something else. I'm worried it's going to be something worse. You know? I mean, I half joked the other day that we're going to start affirming anorexics. I was only half joking.
Well, I think there's another cultural effect which is happening. I'm curious what you think about this, but when it was cool to be trans, it was easier to identify as, like, it was easier to opt in. People who are on the margin, their commitment is low. They're maybe changing their pronouns or their names, maybe changing their clothing styles or dabbling with HRT by taking a friend's HRT, because we know that that happens from time to time, maybe a lot. But they're not really the committed ones. They're experimenting. And now that it's not cool anymore, or we see even in the younger generations that they think trans, it appears to be that the younger generations think trans is sort of played out. Maybe people are opting out now. The ones who are just had those marginal commitments, maybe there's fewer of them.
Look, like I said, I think in pockets you might have a dramatic shift where the reward and incentive structure has collapsed.
Yeah.
You might have that, but I'm a bit skeptical, because I mean, I've got, like, literally this week I dealt with a conservative area, a rural American area, where the social worker was sending emails to all the teachers to affirm pronoun and name change for a 14-year-old girl. That's happening right now. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't see actual evidence that it's in any way declining.
Okay, I want to talk about 2 points there. So the pockets, the concept of the pockets, and then, just kind of another, I guess, story to go along with your idea that you're questioning the decline. Okay, so this idea of the pockets. So I worked in a pediatric gender center in St. Louis, Missouri, which is the middle of the Midwest state, but it is a isn't it it's the middle of the Midwest, or are you the middle of the Midwest, Indiana there?
Keep going.
So I'm in an urban
Missourians.
area, and we have these kind of suburban rings. So I think of like the older suburbs, the established suburbs, maybe not the new money. Then this middle ring suburb where it's like there's money there, but I think of these parents as like kind of well educated, very liberal, like ring of suburbs. And then you hit that rural area.
Mm.
When I started getting really concerned in the center I worked at, one of the things I actually did was I made a zip code map of where are all the kids coming from who are trans identified.
Wow.
What zip codes are they coming from coming to the center? One of the things I saw light up real bright in that kind of mapping was that this was not a trend coming from the real urban, like the real where there's a lot of poverty, where maybe the internet isn't always on. These were not kids who didn't have their own Apple,
Mm.
cell phone.
Mm.
I didn't see a
Mm.
lot there. And I
Mm.
didn't see a lot in the rural area. Again, where this is this me hypothesizing, but
Mm.
rural area like trending is a little bit slower, maybe new
Mm.
ideas. But where I saw the most trans presentation coming from was it had wealth, upper educated parents. I knew that the internet was always on. These were kids who were getting the
Mm.
cell phones handed to them right at an early
Mm.
age. I
Mm.
knew that these kids were in these school districts where they had access to technology and access to, liberal thinking providers. And I saw that kind of glow as the high rates of trans identification were coming from that area. And these kids also had health insurance and access to primary care and could get referred to specialty care. Um, I wonder when we think about the pockets, is that still the pocket where it's coming from, or has it kind of dissipated and now it's just the vulnerable pop up where they're still pulling into that
When
identification?
did you do that map?
It was actually probably 2021 when I started looking at that.
Okay. Okay. So,
And I'll add this. Part of the reason why I did that is because some of the doctors, some of the push on our center, and you kind of go back to woke a little bit, we were asking ourselves, why are we only seeing white kids? Why are we primarily seeing white kids when we are in a city that has more racial diversity?
mm.
And that was one of the questions they were asking was why, well, we're not doing a good job doing outreach into the Black community or the Hispanic community. Why aren't we seeing the Black trans identified kids or the Hispanic identified kids?
Mm.
That's part of why I went to do and look at that kind of zip code
Mm.
analysis.
Mm. So it's this is fascinating because I should probably mention I'm on the board of an organization in South Africa that is called First Do No Harm South Africa, that is working to fight the gender ideology in the schools, and we do a lot of formal stuff. So we challenge school policies, and we publish letters in some of the newspapers to give my colleagues do a lot of that work. So I just want to tell you, I have an insight from South Africa. Okay, so in South Africa, it is only now exploding. Okay, now the demographics of who that is very hard to track because you can't track any data in South Africa. It's like pointless. But what we're hearing is that yes, it's private schools. Okay, but I mean, to say that the private school kid in South Africa has anything in common with the private school kid in America is delusional. All right, we're talking about leagues of differences. Um, I'm hearing that in New Zealand and Australia, it's exploded, and it's got government support. The schools, the therapists, everyone. It seems to me to be peaking in certain places. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's peaking. This might not be the peak, but to say that it's going down would be delusional. Like you'd have to ignore all that data. I just spoke to a detransitioner the other day in the Czech Republic. Okay. Same thing, exploding yeah, okay. Luckily, this person lives in Slovenia, which is a little bit more conservative, but the systems support these things. I've got a detransition in Spain. As far as I know, there's no dissipation in Spain. Okay, so you might have a shift, and okay, so the shift worries me actually. First, it was the wealthy, right? And you see this with other things. First, it was the wealthy adopting luxury beliefs, as Rob Henderson talks about.
Yeah.
Adopting luxury beliefs. Okay, fine. How do you signal that you have this status? You go and you apply for procedures that only the wealthy can afford. All right.
Yeah.
How you signal. Look, I changed sex. Look how privileged I am. And even though that's not what they're doing consciously, the problem is when you've got enough people that have done something that symbolizes status, you're teaching the other people how to symbolize status. Okay. By the way, I'm very glad I'm talking to LGB Coalition, because the gay and lesbian people are going to follow whatever's safest. Why? Because yes, there's still homophobia. Okay. You know that more than I do, in fact.
So if the trending is that the luxury belief had hit first in the wave of those who had the means, the mechanisms, that signaling, that now we might be seeing the wave into those who want to symbol, like
mimicking that behavior.
Okay.
Especially young people. You see, this is the problem. The original problem is identity politics. That's the original. The only reason gender dysphoria exists as a diagnosis is because identity politics activism at the APA. All right, we spoke about this a little bit in Berlin.
Yeah.
When you understand that there's a whole system behind this. Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
Are we seeing any sort of identity fatigue? Are we seeing any pockets of young people saying, I'm sick of this identity, this garbage? I'll say that I see it in my teenagers, but I think that they might be influenced by their mom a little bit. So, yeah.
So that's exactly my point. Is I don't see any evidence in any arena that the identity politics issue is going to go away. The APA is going to do another version of the DSM in, I think, 2026 or 2027. The chances of getting gender dysphoria changed to gender identity disorder is zero. I might be wrong, but I think it's very, very unlikely. For me, we should throw that whole book in the bin, and we should use something called the high top model, which is a lot more of a spectrum understanding of mental health. Okay, it's people can Google it, HITOP. It's a much more rational understanding of the functional aspects of mental health distress on a spectrum, rather than all jumbled up in a book with thousands of criteria that you must meet. So that's the underlying problem. So to go back to what you were saying, if we can agree that there's that there's an identity politics agenda, first, we must agree that, okay, that's a political agenda. Then you must understand that to say that Gen Z and Gen Alpha now are going to suddenly be cured of gender identity incentives. Remember, these incentives are built into the culture, all right? Which got a lot to do with consumption, and now, of course, you are the product, so you can consume and be consumed all at the same time. Okay, it gets complicated, but to say that the identity politics is going to go away would be delusional. To say that the mechanisms to seek status through identity, is going to go away, that's ridiculous. What they've got Okay, not none. They obviously do have, but they are not being taught that they have other avenues to achieve status in the world. So they're going to adopt the easiest thing, which is some kind of dysfunctional identity, a victimology identity.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna ask you two final questions. What should clinicians understand right now about those individuals who are coming into this gender? So any young person who's now taking this on, is there a difference in presentation that clinicians need to understand? Is there going to be more secrecy? Are they going to not broadcast it? Are they going to, should parents know they're going to be hiding this more? Is that what we should be kind of thinking about? You're nodding. Okay.
I know parents are, if they're listening to this, they're holding their breath for my answer. I'm afraid they lie. They lie to their therapists. I've got two at the moment lying to me, and I know they're lying. You know, they've been coached how to. I can't say how I know this, but I see forums where they coach each other on how to lie to parents, teachers, and therapists. So
That's immemorial. That's been going on.
Well, exactly. Well, yeah, but hold on. The difference is now they're all in a forum together, and they're literally telling each other how to do it.
Yeah, that's been going
I
on
also
for
think
decades.
it's different though too,
Sure,
because
yeah.
the lie originally was, I think what they were teaching each other to lie about before was, oh, when you go to the gender center, you have to tell them you've had this your whole life.
Yes,
You have to use this story. You have to say it this way.
exactly.
But they were still willing to broadcast it and be public and upfront about
Yes.
it. The shift is now that maybe they're keeping it more secretive and they're gonna access these things
We've got
without.
we've got kids that are living now, deliberately living two identities: their online trans identity and their real life cisgender identity. They're doing it deliberately. Whereas, as you said, previously it was coaching you on how to achieve the status of being trans, of having this identity, this public, officially supported identity.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay. And then from your perspective, working with detransitioners, do you think that there are rising rates of detransitioners? Has that number?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Besides the fact that I did put this on my Twitter the other day, besides the fact that the resolution of the question, how many detransitioners are there? First problem, detransitioner. All right. The actual underlying problem is how many people resolved identity disorders. That's the actual question. What they've got us all doing is chasing our own tails. Okay, this is the identity politics. They've got us chasing the identity of how many detransitioners is there. What we should be asking is how many people have resolved their identity disorders in adolescence. That's basically everybody. So the resolution of the question is influenced by the advocates of transition. The detransitioners, Cori, I don't know if you feel similar about this, but I've had lots of detransitioners say to me they don't like being called detransitioners because it assumes that transitioning was a real thing in the first place. What they all understand, the ones that have told me this, what they all understand is that they had an identity disorder, which was not treated in the first place and became a disorder. Why wasn't it treated in the first place? Because there was an identity politics agenda in the clinics, in the teachers, in the schools, in some of the families, even, as we know. So people keep saying, how many detransitioners are there? Well, first of all, I've personally dealt with, I don't know, 150 probably by now. They all know detransitioners. I've heard of whole groups of friends that have detransitioned or desisted. We can argue about the semantics. It's all irrelevant. You see the resolution of the question. But if you go back and you say, well, just look in the history of psychology, how many people have resolved identity disorders in adolescence? Having an identity disorder in adolescence is normal. And I know a lot of the LGB advocates are explaining that if your homosexual identity emerges in adolescence, that should be protected as a sexual identity. And that's kind of speaking to what I'm saying, that if we recognize that, then we can distinguish between the sexuality and the identity. You have an identity disorder. You're not detrans. Detrans is, it's like saying how many communists live in South Africa? So then you go and you ask the Communist Party, how many communists have you got registered? Okay, that's a stupid question. Okay, the entire government is communist, but there's no reason to be part of the Communist Party anymore. You see, so there's a Communist Party, but it's got like 400 members. They're all communists. You know, if you understand it properly, you see the problem.
This has been so enlightening.
I do, for everyone listening, yes, I do feel very passionately about this issue.
Yes, we can tell that. Yes. And where can people find you if they want to follow you?
Yeah, probably just the best place if you're listening to this is go to X, Twitter, and look for Vincent Psych SE. SE is for Sweden, just to delineate my previous tag, which was SA from South Africa, because my topics switched quite a lot from the political ideology to the gender stuff. So you can find me there and you can link there. I mean, I'm not really hiding anymore, but I'm just trying to keep things separate from my practice because I deal with other clients as well. I mean, I've got a regular practice as well. So Vincent Psych SE on X, and there you can see my bio. And if you go to the extended bio, you see a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Thank you so much for joining us. I knew as soon as I saw some of your tweets popping up around trans identification, I was like, oh, I want to talk to Vincent about this. So thank you for coming on and chatting with us. And we will hopefully see you again sometime in the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
It's great to talk to you.
That's it for this week of Informed Dissent. A save the date. On January 13th, 2026, we will be gathering on the steps of the United States Supreme Court for cases that will shape the future of girls and women's sports in this country. We invite everyone from near and far to show up, hold a sign, raise your voice, and yes, freeze your butt off if you have to. It might be a small price to pay for doing the right thing. A huge thank you to the entire LGB Courage Coalition team for everything you do each week to keep this movement going and this podcast alive. A special thanks to Leanne Owen for her production work on this week's show. A warm shout out to everyone experiencing their first viral cold of the season. May your tea stay hot, your Kleenex soft, and your symptoms short-lived. Of course, we hope Lauren gets well very, very soon. So mark your calendars for January the 13th. Come stand with us, stand for fairness. We will hope to record potentially a number of podcasts while in DC. And until then, stay informed and ready to dissent.